Ian from Easy Genie. Today I'm going to give you some tips about deciphering old cursive handwriting. If this video helps, please take a moment to like it and follow me. Let's get started. I think I have 5 or 6 tips here, and I'm going to show you a couple different examples of old cursive handwriting because if you're a genealogist or family historian, you know that frequently you have to look at an old document like this. Also, if you are creating documents for your descendants, sometimes you may want to create something like this. This is one of our charts. It's a fan chart, 9 generations, and you can see that the handwriting is beautiful. This is not my handwriting. I actually commissioned a professional calligrapher to do this. But one thing I'd like you to note is look at how easy this is to read by a professional who really took their time to write out these letters and dates compared with this, which is, it's good handwriting, but it's much harder to read. So I have some tips about how to decipher documents like this, or a census return, or an old letter, or a birth register, where you might see cursive handwriting from like the 1600s or 1700s or 1800s or 1900s. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that I recommend when dealing with an old cursive document like this is an old will from the 1800s, is don't try to pick out individual words in the middle of the document, because it might be just hard to pick out what that is. Like this one right here, it's COMPE, I can't read the rest of it. A better tactic that I've done is to actually start at the very beginning of the document, and maybe up here, or maybe at the beginning of the paragraph, and start reading it naturally out loud. And the reason is because once you get the cadence of the document, it's much easier to decipher the words than trying to pick them out individually. And let me show you what I mean. So this first letter is hard to read. At first it looks like an M or an H, but then you see next to it is the name of a town. That's Aberdeen. So this says, at Aberdeen, the 7th or 11th day of June in the year 1851, in the presence of Archibald Davidson, Esquire, Advocate, I can't read that, of the Commissariat of Aberdeen, I can't read that word, Robert Smith, Advocate in Aberdeen, and so on. So it's much easier for me to start at the very beginning of the document than rather just to try to pick out names or words in the middle. So that's my first tip. The second tip, if you're not sure of a letter or a number that appears on the page, try to find another example where you are sure of that particular number, and then you can make a determination. So let me give you an example right now. This date right here, it could be 1837, or it could be 1857, or it could be 1851. There's lots of possibilities here, and the tricky thing is this digit here, which could be a 3 or a 5 or a 7. So what I'm going to do to determine the right date, if it's not in the index, is I might find other examples of the same number. So right over here, I see that it looks like it is a 1 and a 5. Possibly a 1 and a 6, but I can also see another date here, 2194. So right away, for instance, I know that this number 1 is not the same as this number here. So this looks like a 7 to me, but it's still not certain. So but what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully compare the numbers here to the numbers that appear elsewhere in this document to determine what the exact date is there. One other thing you should be aware of when it comes to numbers is sometimes they'll do an abbreviation. This is 1,000. But the person who wrote this just spelled THOUS, so it's a short form of 1,000. So the third tip I have for dealing with old documents like this, oftentimes when you get a scan downloaded from some source, this came from Scotland's People, by the way, it's dark. And what you can do if you download the image and you're looking at it, you can't read it quite clearly, is to adjust the brightness of the image or the contrast between the light and the dark. So let me show you what I'm doing. This is on Mac Preview. If you're using a Windows machine, you might have another piece of software called Paint, and you can do something very similar. But I'm going to adjust the exposure so it gets brighter. Did you see that? I can also adjust the contrast so there's a little bit more distinction between the letters and the white space on the page. So that's one tactic. If you're not sure how to do this, one thing you can also do is just increase the brightness of the screen that you're using, your computer screen or your laptop screen. So that's my third tip. The fourth tip is if you do have a bad scan, and I don't consider this to be a bad scan, but sometimes I've downloaded something and I can barely read it because it's too faint. Try to find another source for the same document, because sometimes there'll be multiple scans done by different companies. A typical example is Ancestry and Family Search. So I've read or I've seen elsewhere that Ancestry scans sometimes are not as good as the Family Search scans, or Family Search has done something to either rescan them or improve them. So if you're using Ancestry, for instance, and you can't read a document that well because the scan is just too poor, is the quality's not good, try to look on Family Search to find the same image. And it's possible that either they'll do something to the image to make it easier to read, or they've actually scanned it separately and they've done a better job of doing it. The next tip that I have for dealing with these types of downloads from other sources is be very careful of the transcriptions that are provided or the index entries that are provided, because sometimes they're just flat out wrong. And let me give you an example of this. Let me find it here. So this is a case from an image that somebody shared on TikTok, and they're looking through the document. You can see it's an old cursive document, and they're wondering, what does this name say? And the ancestry index for it was Elizabether. And that is, of course, quite wrong. It looks pretty clear that it looks like Christopher, maybe with a S or a flourish at the end. It's not Elizabether. And I think what happened here is, a long time ago, Ancestry used to outsource its transcriptions to other countries, including countries where the native language spoken is not English. And the result is sometimes these transcriptions are just wrong. It's very difficult to transcribe something in another language if you don't know it. And I'm not blaming the people from China at all. They were just tasked with trying to decipher this. They're not as familiar with the names or the language, and it just was hard to do. Just as it would be extremely hard for me to do if it was the other way around, or for any other language I don't speak, whether it's Polish or Spanish or something like that. So Ancestry was using human transcription before. They don't do it anymore. But even nowadays, for the automated transcriptions, sometimes the dates and the names are just flat out wrong. People say, oh, well, AI will take care of this. Artificial intelligence will make for better transcriptions of old cursive documents. And I don't believe it yet, because the reason is because there's so much variation in the quality of cursive handwriting. And let's just take a look at 3 examples. This will right here from the mid-1800s, this document, which is from the 1700s, and then this other document, which is a modern document from a modern calligrapher. And you can see just the style and the quality is completely different. The way people write numbers. Take a look at this. The 7 has a little cross through it. Not everybody does that. So there's a lot of variation here. I don't think AI is really up to the task of doing a good job. And what this means, practically speaking, and this is kind of like the tip to round things out, is you have to check all transcriptions. You have to use your own mind and ability to try to decipher, just to make sure it's correct. What you're reading is the same as what supposedly is on the screen. And then actually I do have one more extra tip to share. And that is, if you're really, really stumped, you can't figure something out, go online and find a community of people who may know something about this particular document or a style of handwriting, and ask them. So this is from the Scottish Indexes group. A common example I see in this Facebook group is people will share an old census document or a birth register or something like that, and then they'll say, number 23, Bunrig, Mary Wilson, Jean Hyslop, what do you think? And 23 is this particular household here, and there's some names here. So the person who wrote this Facebook post, they can't read what these names are, and you can see it's a little bit crowded. So and they got answers. There's 14 people responded and tried to help out. So this is kind of crowdsourcing the deciphering these documents, and it's a really good approach to doing it. Of course, you can't do it for everything. You can't do it like I would not like to do. This is a 20-page will. There's no way I would ever send a 20-page will to one of these Facebook groups and say, oh, hey, can you help me decipher this? That just wouldn't be fair. But if I was to say, all right, well, can you help me decipher what this first line up here says? Is this dependent state, or does it say interpersonal? Like, what is it? Help me figure this out. And I'm sure a lot of people would be willing to do that. So those are my tips for deciphering old cursive handwriting in genealogy documents. If this video helped, please take a moment to like it and follow me, and I'll see you next time.